Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Mohammed Saleh, and let's get the show rolling. So this is the big moment. Cyclone Biparjoy, the very severe cyclonic storm with wind speeds of over 150 kilometers per hour, has now made its landfall at the coastal districts of Saurashtra and Kutch in the Indian state of Gujarat. Nearly about 100,000 people from over 120 different villages at the coastal areas have been evacuated from the vulnerable regions. The Army, the Navy and the IAF teams are on standby. But this, remember, is the moment that the relief agencies had been bracing themselves for. The cyclone will make its complete landfall till about midnight tonight in India. It will unleash the full force of its fury, but preparations have been made to mitigate its impact. And on Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you everything that you need to know about Cyclone Biparjoy, the cyclone that means disaster. And also on the show tonight, today marks exactly 3 years since the gruesome clashes in the Galwan Valley, where the Chinese soldiers, remember, were beaten back when they were attempting to change the status quo at the border. But interestingly, at a time when satellite images are showing enormous Chinese military build-up along the line of actual control, what is interesting is that the Chinese seem to be speaking about a strange kind of normalcy at the line of actual control. But the Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar has been categorical. He's described the situation at the line of actual control as fragile and difficult. We'll also be taking a look at what NATO is doing in Germany, because NATO is conducting its biggest ever military drills called the Air Defender 23. With over 250 fighter aircraft and 10,000 personnel from 25 of its member nations who are taking part in Germany, this at a time when the war in Ukraine is delicately poised. Now, Kiev is fighting its counter-offensive. So is it just a coincidence that NATO is conducting these military drills, or is there a bigger message behind these drills? Is this just posturing by NATO, or is it a message for Moscow to show us to what NATO's military alliance is actually capable of at a time when Eastern Europe is in the grip of a serious war? And then we'll also go to Australia, where in a serious allegation, a sitting Member of Parliament of the Australian legislature, Lydia Thorpe, has accused a fellow Senator, David Van, of sexual harassment inside the premises of the Australian Parliament. In a tearful address to the Senate, Lydia Thorpe said that she'd been subjected to sexual comments. She was cornered in a stairwell and was also reportedly inappropriately touched and propositioned by some very powerful men within the Australian Parliament. The question that we ask tonight is, why is even the Australian Parliament not a safe space for women? And also on the show, if you're someone who loves eating mangoes, then we tell you why, despite it being the peak mango season, you're not able to get your hands on your favorite mangoes this season. But first, let's start with the biggest story tonight. Cyclone Biparjoy has now finally made its landfall. It hit Gujarat's Kutch district and is now barreling further inwards into India. Now, according to the Met Department, it is moving at a speed of over 120 to 140 kilometers per hour. Now, for the unversed, this is one of the most powerful tropical storms to have hit India in recent decades. It has triggered powerful winds, storm surges, and also lashing rains. As we speak, this rain is hammering a 325-kilometer stretch of the coast between Mandavi in Gujarat and Karachi in Pakistan. Remember, this is a cyclone that is targeting both India and Pakistan. Now, look at these images. They are from the coastal town of Mandvi. They show the flooded streets and also the swaying trees. Emergency teams are conducting the rescue operations. Now, the situation is no different in Dwarka, the gateway to Gujarat. The entire city has come to a virtual standstill. Shops are shut. The roads are completely empty as the high tidal wave is pounding the coastal areas. And also in the maximum city, the city of Mumbai, the tides are said to be higher than usual. Images show them pounding the city's iconic Marine Drive. Now, reports say that nearly about 1,600 fishing boats and about 5,000 merchant vessels have been shepherded to safety. Now, if we speak in terms of the overall measures, a total of 94,000, that's almost about 100,000 people in the most vulnerable of the areas have been evacuated and have been taken to safer shelter homes. At least about 4,000 hoardings have been taken down in the affected districts. Over 200,000 animals and cattle have been evacuated to higher ground, and about 25 teams of the National Disaster Relief Force, or the NDRF, have been deployed across the states of Gujarat and Maharashtra. In the state of Gujarat, the state disaster management authorities have deployed about 6 ham radio teams. Now, such radios are used when communication networks fail and electricity cannot be guaranteed, because when wind speeds over 150 kilometers per hour, it is quite inevitable that a lot of the areas could also experience power outages as well. Now, the Indian Army has been deployed, more than 27 relief columns across the state of Gujarat. Now, these teams consist of divers and swimmers as well. The Indian Navy has kept all of its 8 Coast Guard stations in Gujarat on the highest state of readiness. Reports say that at least about 15 ships and 7 aircraft will be available round the clock for the rescue operations, and the next few hours are going to be critical in terms of the devastation this cyclone can in fact wreak in the coastal parts of Gujarat. Simply put, the authorities, the Indian authorities at this moment are fully prepared to deal with this cyclone. Now, this is the 4th such cyclone to have impacted the coastal part of Gujarat in the last 5 years. And this brings into focus India's standard operating procedures to deal with these kind of storms. Now, you see, there was a time when cyclones could wreak complete havoc at the time that they would strike. But then again, the governments since the last 2 decades have put in place certain standard operating procedures to ensure that these cyclones do not come and cause complete havoc as they did before. Now, they're no longer as big a threat as what they used to be just about 2 odd decades ago. The turning point was, of course, the 1999 super cyclone that happened in Odisha. It hit the state with wind speeds of over 250 kilometers per hour, and it caused the deaths of at least about 10,000 people. We were talking about 1999 in the Indian state of Odisha. It also resulted in heavy damage, and it left a trail of devastation in its path. The devastation turned out to be a bit of a wake-up call, and it forced the authorities in India to develop a comprehensive plan to deal with cyclones. And today, it is important to say this, that the cyclones, no matter how powerful, are not as devastating as they were before, because the governments in place have now put in place certain mitigating factors to ensure that people are not that badly affected. These plans that are in place reduce the damage that is caused by the cyclones considerably, especially in terms of human lives. We'll tell you how about in a bit, but first, let's in fact break down the strategy for you. It consists of a three-layered mechanism. The first layer deals with the software. It's an early warning system, so what this does is it alerts the locals. It also allows the local administration to put in place the evacuation plans and the conduction of drills and dissemination of information at the very earliest. The second layer involves the building of hardware. This involves the creation of shelters, of construction of embankments, and also the setting up of weather instruments. The third layer concerns making the coastal infrastructure more reliant. This involves taking critical infrastructure such as power transmission lines or water supply lines underground and ensuring that the railway networks and airports do not get inundated. Now, this three-layered mechanism that has been put in place over the course of the last 2 decades has reduced the amount of devastation that is caused by cyclones considerably. Now, just look as to how the last few big cyclones have been dealt with. In 2016, Cyclone Vardha hit the state of Tamil Nadu. The prompt warnings and more preparedness measures facilitated the evacuation of people from the vulnerable areas, and it restricted the death toll of Cyclone Vardha to only 18. In 2019, Cyclone Fani struck the coast of Odisha with wind speeds of about 175 kilometers per hour. And yet, this time round, the state of Odisha was way better prepared than what it was in 1999, and Cyclone Fani caused minimal damage to human lives. In 2020, Cyclone Amphan hit the Bay of Bengal. The state administration was, of course, quick to react. It made enough and adequate plans so that it was able to evacuate 1.5 lakh people, that is 150,000 people, before the cyclone made its landfall. And that is the crucial difference. And this time, too, India is fully prepared to reduce the damage that storm Biparjoy, which literally translates to disaster, can cause. But to achieve this, we all, each one of us, will have to do our bit. If the cyclone happens to be passing through your area, it's important to remember this. Don't venture out. Keep yourself updated. Follow the instructions given by your local administration. And above all, stock up. Because remember, unlike in the past when cyclones such as this used to cause enormous devastation in terms of human lives, at this moment, with the amount of intelligence that we've got and also with the infrastructure that has been put in place over the course of the last decades, it is no longer needed that we go through the same pain and devastation that cyclones were able to unleash in the past. And cyclones, even when they come, will come and pass by with minimal destruction. Let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are tracking on Gravitas tonight. Now remember, today is of course the 15th of June. It's exactly 3 years since the gruesome clash that took place at the Galwan Valley. The first deadly skirmish between India and China in over 5 decades. The clash has resulted in the loss of 20 lives of Indian Jawans from the 16th Bihar Regiment. Now, the Chinese also lost a number of soldiers, but as is the habit with the Chinese People's Liberation Army, it chose not to disclose the number of Chinese soldiers who ended up losing their lives. But later it emerged that China had ended up losing anywhere from 40 to 45 of its soldiers. But remember, the Galvan Clash was not fought with any sophisticated weapons. It was fought with sticks and stones, and the Chinese had come prepared with barbed wire that was wrapped around iron rods. And the Chinese government only acknowledged about its casualties much later, and it said that it lost only about 3 of its soldiers. But that clash was a wake-up call. Now, these clashes have led to the ongoing standoff, which has now reached its 4th year now. The winds of change have swept the region on both sides. So what sort of changes have taken place since the Galvan Valley? Now, in the next few minutes, we'll discuss as to what has happened and what has changed at the line of actual control. And let me begin with India. The kind of changes that India has undertaken to tame the Chinese dragon's aggression at the line of actual control. Irrespective of what the Chinese may say verbally, the fact is how the Chinese behave at the border is crucial. And India has made it a point that it will take the Chinese not at their word, but on the basis of their actions. So to deal with the Chinese challenge, India has increased its troop strength along the line of actual control. You see, until China provoked India and moved troops near the LAC, the Indian army had used to guard the Ladakh region with just a division worth of about 15,000 soldiers. But ever since the Galvan Clash, the troop strength by India has been more than tripled. There are now more than 2 divisions, or at least about 50,000 Indian soldiers, along with supporting elements, have been stationed at the LAC. Secondly, the reorientation of the strike corps. You see, the Indian army has 3 large strike corps, and these are basically large formations that consist of about 90,000 soldiers. Until 2021, the 3 strike corps were predominantly oriented towards Pakistan. But after the Galvan Clash, the army has reoriented the 1st strike corps along the northern sector, and this is really crucial. The change number 3 that has been effected is the creation of border infrastructure. The Indian government has given a renewed push towards the construction of new helipads, roads, tunnels and bridges along the LAC. Now, the aim is to assist the induction of large formations and armoured columns, and apart from the visible infrastructure, India is also building ammunition, depots and shelters to stock up on supplies for the brutal winters that are prevalent in these battlegrounds. Now, this was the Indian side of the story. What are the Chinese doing? Now, remember, there have been 18 rounds of core commander talks that have been held between India and China since the Galvan Clash. They've yielded in some results, but still not enough has been done to renew confidence between the two nations. So what is the Chinese dragon up to? Officially, China says that things are returning to normal. This is what Global Times, the official mouthpiece of the Chinese administration, has been saying, that things are limping back to normalcy at the LAC. They say that there is almost no chance of the situation escalating further. But the Chinese president's statements tell a completely different story. Now, here's what Xi Jinping in fact said at the Communist Party's National Security Commission, a body that deals with national security strategy. Now, allow me to quote Xi Jinping, and this is what he said. "We must adhere to bottom-line thinking and the worst-case scenario thinking and get ready to undergo the major tests of high winds and rough ways and even perilous stormy seas." So how are these words of Xi Jinping to be interpreted? What was he meaning? Was this Xi Jinping sounding the war bugle? Because it certainly looked like that. Because what has also been witnessed on the Chinese side of the LAC settles the matter. On one hand, China seems to be talking peace, but on the other, it is preparing for war. Satellite images have exposed the Chinese doublespeak, because along the line of actual control, instead of in fact trying to build confidence with India, what China appears to be doing is it has transformed the topography of the border areas. A report that has now appeared in the Chatham House, which is a British-based think tank, it has shown some satellite images. It shows us to have Chinese infrastructure, military infrastructure, mind you, has been ramped up in the last few years, ever since the Galvan Clash. So what sort of infrastructure are we talking about here? Now, this is an extensive set of installations and also a comprehensive ecosystem to support troop deployments. This is what the Chinese are doing behind the curtain. They're building roads, outposts and weatherproof camps. They're building parking areas. They're building helipads and runways and airfields and railway lines and missile bases and missile silos along the LAC. So why does China want to talk peace but at the same time prepare for war? Now look at this image. It shows the Galwan Valley, the PLA standoff position to be precise. The Chinese bases here show signs of extended buildings. They now also have well-maintained road networks, one that could enhance China's capacity to send extra troops and supplies to its forward positions. The second image apparently shows a heliport in Aksai Chin. Now, this airport is currently under construction away from the front lines near the Aksai Chin Lake, and the facility reportedly comprises of at least about 18 hangars and several runways that are intended to be used by possible drones. The third image that will come up on your screens, it shows a bridge. And can you guess as to where this is being built? It is being built over the Pangong Tso. It's a saline lake that is strategically important for both India and China. This bridge will apparently help China in quick mobilization of troops. Such rapid mobility for the Chinese forces will, of course, strengthen their presence and the territorial claims in the region. Now, these were just 4 images. And besides this, there's also some significant Chinese activity at the Dipsang Plains, one of the key friction points in the Ladakh sector of the LAC. Now, here's the thing. India's actions along the LAC are strictly defensive. And India has made it clear to China that it respects China's territorial integrity and in turn wants China to do the same. India's defensive installations along the LAC are aimed at safeguarding its territorial integrity. But on the other hand, China's actions reek of warmongering and also the desire to escalate tensions at the border. Now, these satellite images, of course, expose China's obsession with muscle flexing and provocation. So the question is this. The Chinese dragon must answer. Even after 18 rounds of core commander level talks, why have things not been resolved yet? And more importantly, if China claims that things are getting back to normal along the line of actual control, then why is the People's Liberation Army quite clearly preparing for war over the Himalayan mountains? And also here's one reason as to why China shouldn't be thinking of war. Now this afternoon, just this afternoon, India has okayed a deal to purchase armed drones from the United States. And this move has come right ahead of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Washington. Remember, the Indian Prime Minister will be in the United States of America on a state visit from the 21st till the 24th. And this deal of India purchasing the MQ-9 Reaper drones is something that is going to strengthen the military ties between India and the United States. Not to mention, this of course is also going to boost India's defense preparedness. Let's in fact break down the details for you. The Defense Ministry of India has approved the procurement of the drones. Which drones are these? These are the MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones. So how many of them is India likely to buy? Now, according to reports that have come in, India is expected to purchase at least about 31 of these Sea Guardian drones. So how much will these drones cost? Now, according to preliminary estimates, about $3 billion. And who will manufacture these drones? Now, the San Diego-based General Atomics defense firm is the one that will manufacture these drones. Now, reports further say that this announcement follows a Defense Council meeting between India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. This meeting took place last week. Just a week on, the two sides have also sealed the deal to purchase the MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones. So how lethal are the MQ-9B drones? Now, in one word, they're pretty lethal. Now, these are unmanned and operated remotely. These drones weigh about 2,000 kilograms each, and they can fly for more than 24 hours at a stretch. They have a cruising speed of about 230 kilometers per hour, and at this speed, they can cover anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 nautical miles. In a nutshell, this deal is, of course, a big milestone for India. But it was the United States that was pushing for this deal to, in fact, go through to boost the defense capabilities. It's also a clear indication of the growing collaboration between the world's two largest democracies, and these are the Sea Guardian drones. And it'll be very interesting to see as to how soon they'll be operational on the Indian side. Now, staying on with more news from India, the outgoing Wrestling Federation chief Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh has been charged with sexual harassment and stalking. The Delhi police, however, has suggested the dropping of the case filed by the minor, citing insufficient evidence. And remember, this charge sheet by the Delhi police has come after months and months of protest by the prominent Indian wrestlers such as Sakshi Malik, Vinesh Phogat and Bajrang Punia. The POCSO, that is the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences case, was filed by the minor wrestler's father. The father had made two statements before, one before the police and another before the magistrate, but then withdrew both the statements later. 6 other wrestlers have also filed separate complaints. So who is Brij Bhushan Singh? The 66-year-old accused is a member of India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. He's been the Wrestling Federation of India's chief since 2012 for the last 11 long years. Now, Singh has also faced a series of criminal cases throughout his career but hasn't been convicted yet. On the 18th of January earlier this year, some of India's most decorated wrestlers accused him of sexual harassment. So look how many months it has taken for them to in fact register their FIR and to charge sheet this man. The wrestlers staged a demonstration at Jantar Mantar in New Delhi. They demanded an impartial and an immediate probe into the matter. The Sports Ministry promised immediate action. Meanwhile, Brij Bhushan Singh was asked to step aside from his position. And days later, the Wrestling Federation of India denied any wrongdoing. A committee was formed headed by Khel Ratna awardee Mary Kom. It was given 6 weeks to look into the allegations against Brij Bhushan Singh. But what is interesting is that despite this committee having been tasked to probe into this matter, into the accusations, very little came out of it. The wrestlers claimed that they were kept in the dark, so on the 21st of April they filed official complaints, but no FIRs were still registered. On the 23rd of April, 2 months since the committee was formed, the wrestlers once again took to the streets. They demanded for the findings of the probe to be made public. A day later, the government shared what it called as major findings. It mentioned, believe it or not, it mentioned some structural lapses, and it called for effective communication between the federation and the sportspersons. On the 25th of April, the wrestlers sought the help from the Supreme Court. They filed a petition seeking an FIR against Brij Bhushan Singh. The top court issued a notice to the Delhi police to do the same. On the 28th of April, the Delhi police registered 2 FIRs. Meanwhile, the protests, of course, continued at Jantar Mantar. A month later, the wrestlers attempted to march towards India's new parliament building. And the visuals emerged of them being manhandled and detained. So this was the treatment that was meted out to India's most decorated wrestlers. This rough treatment resulted in national outrage. The International Olympic Committee and also the United World Wrestling condemned the incident. On the 30th of May, the protests, of course, reached the Indian pilgrimage city of Haridwar. The wrestlers huddled at the bank of holy river Ganga to immerse their medals, which they had worked so hard all their lives to in fact win for India. The women wrestlers were of course seen sobbing as they clutched at their medals and their awards, and eventually they called it off on the insistence of India's Farmers Organization chief Naresh Tikait. The protest of course entered their 6 months in the month of June. The Olympic medalists Sakshi Malik and Bajrang Punia, along with their coaches, met with India's Home Minister Amit Shah at his official residence. The details of the meeting were not put out in the public domain, and days later the wrestlers also met with the Sports Minister Anurag Thakur. He promised the police investigation will in fact come to an end by the 15th of June, which is today. Staying with the deadline, what is interesting is that a charge sheet has now been filed after months of sitting on the streets protesting against Brij Bhushan Singh. But the police has also submitted a report that is seeking the cancellation of the POCSO case filed by the minor wrestler. Meanwhile, NATO is carrying out its biggest ever air drills in Germany. 25 nations are participating along with its newest member, Finland. Now, what is interesting about these drills is the timing. They come as Ukraine has started its much anticipated counter-offensive against Russia. So what exactly is the purpose of these drills, and why now? Because the fact is, nothing about the Ukraine war has been decided yet. The Ukrainian counter-offensive that has been backed to the hilt by the NATO military alliance could be rebuffed by the Russians. And in the event Ukraine's counter-offensive is defeated, will NATO then decide to get into a direct confrontation with Russia? Is this what NATO is preparing for with its military drills? Our next report gets you the details.
NATO is showing off its strength. It's carrying out its biggest ever air drills in Germany. 24 nations are participating in the Air Defender exercise. Japan has also joined as an observer. But the question here is, why is NATO flexing its defense muscle? Is it simply posturing, or is it really preparing for war? If Ukraine's counteroffensive fails, is NATO going to fight the war against Russia? Just look at the sheer extent of these drills. They'll continue for 2 weeks. Around 10,000 personnel and 250 aircraft are in Germany. Hundreds of them are from the US alone. The exercises will play out at 4 sites across Germany and 1 each in the Netherlands and in the Czech Republic. Nearly 2,000 flights are to be carried out over the North and Baltic Seas. The drills will play out at 4 sites across Germany and 1 each in the Netherlands and the Czech Republic. It began with an air show in Wunstorf, featuring cargo and refueling planes, workhorse aircraft. These planes have played a crucial role in sending weapons and supplies to Ukraine. Today, America's F-16 and F-35 fighter jets took off from the US airbase in Spangdahlem. Airborne Warning and Control System or AWACS reconnaissance planes are also there. And it's not just defense systems. The NATO forces are testing out overall preparedness for war. The US military on Tuesday showcased a medical exercise at the Ramstein Air Base. Yesterday, simulated medical evacuation flights arrived at the airbase from Romania. Personnel ferried dolls on stretchers into a waiting hospital bus headed to the Landstuhl Army Medical Center. The Air Defender drill spent about 5 years in the making. The planning began back in 2018. German Air Force General Ingo Gerhardt insists the drills aren't directed at Russia. He says they're defensive in nature. But interestingly, he also said that when he first proposed the drills 5 years ago, the trigger was Russia's annexation of Crimea. And now the exercise comes as fighting escalates at NATO's doorstep in Ukraine. One cannot help but speculate. Will NATO fight Ukraine's war for it? NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance's support has helped Ukraine in its counteroffensive.
Ukraine has launched a counteroffensive. What we see is fierce fighting. It's still early days, but we also see that the Ukrainians are making gains and that Ukraine is able to liberate occupied land. This is due to the courage, the bravery, the skills of the Ukrainian soldiers, but it also highlights and demonstrates that the support NATO allies have been giving to Ukraine now for many, many months actually makes a difference on the battlefield as we speak.
But what if things go south? If Ukraine's counteroffensive fails, will NATO take the matter in its own hands? Only a few months ago, Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist Seymour Hersh hinted at something similar. He said, and I quote, "I'm told the game is going to be, this is NATO, we are supporting NATO in offensive operations against the Russians, which is not going to fool the world. It's us fighting Russia." What he meant was Washington might directly meddle in the war if Kyiv starts losing to Moscow. These were some big claims. What made him say that? He attributed them to inputs received from his friends in the US administration. It's something to think about. Not only has the US supplied endless weapons to Ukraine, it has also looked the other way when Ukraine used them for offense, stepping over the West's red line to use its weapons only for defense and counteroffensive. This brings us back to this question, one that we've been asking for a while. Whose war is it exactly? The question still stands. Is it America's proxy war? And will it become NATO's now? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, the Holy Lands of Jerusalem are grounds where even angels fear to tread. Ever since the Balfour Declaration and the eventual establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, with the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their ancestral lands, the Israel-Palestine issue has been one of the biggest flashpoints on the global stage. And now, China has floated a peace plan. On the 13th of June, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, began his 4-day trip to China. He was welcomed as an old and a good friend of the Chinese people by the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin, who also noted that Mahmoud Abbas was the first Arab head of the state to be hosted by China this year. On Wednesday, China said that it had established a strategic partnership with the Palestinian Authority. As part of this, Xi Jinping proposed a 3-point peace plan as a possible solution to resolve the Israel-Palestinian conflict. So what is this 3-point peace plan of Xi Jinping? Well, according to Xi Jinping, the way to bring about peace between the state of Israel and Palestine is to set up a 2-state solution with the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the basis of the 1967 borders. And interestingly, China also backs East Jerusalem to be the capital of a future Palestinian state. Secondly, China wants increased development and humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people. And thirdly, it also wants an immediate end to provocative actions and illegal construction of encroachment on Palestinian lands by Israeli settlers, and the creation of conditions for peace talks through large-scale international meetings. Not just this, in the immediate future, China has promised to mobilize international support for Palestine to obtain full membership of the United Nations. Now, China has been increasingly vocal on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. As it is stepping up its peacemaking efforts, Beijing, remember, has also offered to facilitate the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks in the month of April as well, when Foreign Minister Qin Yang had spoken over the phone with the foreign ministers of Israel and Palestine. In a clear contrast to the United States, China has also ramped up its criticism against Israel over its repeated illegal expansion of settlements in occupied Palestinian territories. Now, China has called for multiple emergency meetings at the United Nations in response to the conflicts at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and at the Gaza Strip. So the question is this: why is China seeking to establish peace between Israel and Palestine? What's in it for Beijing? Now, is this action just out of goodwill, or is this an attempt at more diplomatic power projection on behalf of Beijing? Because the fact is, while on the one hand China has been lampooned for its belligerence in the South China Sea and its bullying attitude towards its smaller neighbors, its open threats of staging an invasion of Taiwan, on the global stage, China is on a diplomatic blitz. In the month of March earlier this year, Beijing had managed to make Riyadh and Tehran to shake hands, the two most bitter rivals of West Asia who for decades had been fighting to their proxies in the region, but they were brought to the negotiating table. And much to the chagrin of the United States, because this was nothing short of a diplomatic coup where China was pushing the Americans out of their crucial space in the Middle East. Now, till just a few months back, Saudi Arabia and Iran putting their differences aside was almost unthinkable. But the Chinese, with their diplomacy, made this happen. Now, China has also floated a peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. A special Chinese envoy has been tasked with finding a peaceful way forward, and he had gone around hopping through the European capitals to try and find middle ground between Russia and Ukraine. China, but it is yet to make a breakthrough in the Russia-Ukraine war, but its success between Riyadh and Tehran has made its diplomatic offices be pretty buoyant. But make no mistake, this is not the first time that China has offered to mediate between Israel and Palestine. In 2013, Xi Jinping had proposed a 4-point peace initiative. The proposal was expanded in 2017 with a 3-way dialogue that would involve Israel, Palestine and China, with support for Palestinian development through China's Belt and Road Initiative. You see, the fact is, for the last 7 decades, every time the region would erupt into a conflict, the United States, as the sole superpower, had tried to nudge the two sides to come to the negotiating table. But the United States had been consistent about one thing. It always looked the other way every time the Israelis carried out their illegal constructions on Palestinian lands. So the question is, can Beijing succeed in bringing about peace to what is arguably one of the most troubled regions of the last century, ever since the State of Israel was brought into existence. Now, you must have seen people regifting their birthday gifts. You must have done the same yourself. But imagine if there was a human body in place of a gift. A person giving away parts of the body for money. Now, this is not fiction. We're talking about what has happened in real life. We're telling you the acts of a morgue manager at the Harvard Medical School, one of the most reputed medical schools in the world. And reports say that this man was stealing, selling and also shipping human body parts for profit. Now, these were body parts that were meant for research work. So why would somebody sell these body parts? And how did the man pull off this kind of a stunt? So let's get into the details. Now, the man in question is 55-year-old Cedric Lodge. He was the former morgue manager who used to deal with human remains. Now, these are body parts donated to the school for educational purposes, but Cedric Lodge has been charged with conspiracy for transporting stolen human body parts. So what did Cedric Lodge do with the bodies? Now, he was caught stealing parts of the donated cadavers. The body parts included heads, brains, bones and even the skin. Now, Cedric Lodge transported these body parts to his residence in New Hampshire. Now, reports say that he conspired with his wife to sell the body parts, and authorities have found two buyers, Katrina McLean and Joshua Taylor, both of whom have now been charged under illicit trade. Reports say that McLean in fact sold the body parts in her shop, and she's accused of selling the parts in multiple states. McLean even sold the human skin to a man in Pennsylvania who later used it to create leather with human skin. Now, McLean was charged with transporting stolen goods within and out of the state lines. Although the maximum sentence can be up to 10 years, she was let go since it was considered some kind of a non-violent offense. Now, reports say that she'll soon be called to the court again in Pennsylvania. Now, let us remind you, Cedric Lodge is not new to this horrendous trade. Authorities say that he was selling body parts since 2018, that is since the last 5 years, sometimes through the US Postal Service. Now, this may sound almost unbelievable that the US Postal Service was being used to send body parts to different places in the United States. But Lodge brought his buyers inside the school to choose the remains. He displayed the body parts and let the buyers select what they liked. So how much did Lodge in fact earn from this illicit trade? For starters, one buyer paid about $37,000 for the cadaver parts. In 2020, Lodge was paid $200 for selling human brains. In 2019, the prosecutors say that Lodge received $1,000, and the memo further said, head number 7, that is what was sold. So what are the reactions to this incident? Well, the police were left awestruck, and they said that some crimes simply defy all understanding and explanations. The prosecutors say that there were other people who will also face charges in separate indictments. So who are these three other people? 52-year-old Matthew Lampy, 41-year-old Jeremy Polly, and Candace Chapman Scott. Well, the Candace is not directly connected to the Harvard morgue case. She's been accused of stealing and selling body parts. The Harvard Medical School called this incident abhorrent betrayal. The university officials have now apologized to the anatomical donors and their families. Organ trafficking is now a worldwide phenomenon. Studies show that the illicit trade is part of a $1.7 billion industry. Trafficking happens in countries with fewer regulations. So how do people like Lodge get away with it? It's through ties with corrupt medical professionals, laboratory staff, drivers and law enforcement agencies. So the question is, will the Harvard Medical School, which is one of the most reputed medical schools in the United States, gain back the trust of the organ donors? Is Harvard University housing more of these illicit traders? We'll of course have to wait and watch for more details on this. In Europe's relentless battle against inflation, one would think that Sweden's surprisingly high inflation in the month of May was due to the supply chain barriers or the ongoing war in Ukraine. But don't be too fast in jumping to a conclusion, because another culprit has apparently emerged. Now, experts believe that it was the Beyonce effect which resulted in inflation. So what does Beyonce have to do with Sweden's economy? Well, the singer kicked off her first ever solo tour in 7 years Last month, the American star started her world tour in Stockholm. And Beyonce held the first concert of her Renaissance World Tour in the Swedish capital. Tens of thousands of fans flocked to Stockholm in the middle of May to catch the two concerts. And according to reports, Beyonce drew more than 80,000 over 2 nights to Stockholm's Friends Arena. And now, the economists believe that it is because of Beyonce and her fans that Sweden has witnessed a higher than expected inflation of about 9.7% for the month of May. Now, the country's statistics agency, Statistics Sweden, claims that consumer prices in Sweden rose by about 9.7% from a year earlier. And the rate fell from the previous month's 10.5%, but was slightly higher than what the economists had forecast. In other words, Sweden saw a decrease in electricity and food prices, which in turn contributed to the lower inflation rate for the month of May. However, owing to tens of thousands of fans of the R&B star flocking to Stockholm to attend the concert, the cost of certain goods and services in fact increased. So what is the reason behind the bump in the price of certain goods? Now, according to various economists, the beehive swarmed the hotels for the opening of the Renaissance World Tour. The fans ended up traveling from all over the world to catch her shows, taking advantage of the weak Swedish currency and the lower ticket prices. And searches for accommodation in cities on the tour simply shot up. Reports further stated that most hotels were booked completely. They were filled with fans who had come to attend Beyonce's concert, leading to a rise in overall inflation in Sweden. So has this ever happened before? The economists say that although large sporting tournaments often skew the economic statistic, it is pretty rare for a single event to have such an impact on a nation's economy. Now, very soon, Bruce Springsteen is also set to perform for about 3 nights in Gothenburg, and experts are now worried that this may also have a similar kind of an effect. But we must say that it will be hard for Springsteen to match up to the Queen Bey's beehive. All right, now the summer season is at its peak. So what do you do in summers? Well, there is a seasonal delicacy that is offered by nature, mango, and everyone indulges in this fruit. Dessert for dinner? Well, mangoes are your answer. Do you want a shake after a long run? A wholesome smoothie for breakfast? The mango, remember, is considered as the king of fruit. And have you noticed lately that as you step out to purchase mangoes, their availability in the markets near you is not in the kind of abundance as it used to be last year? The reason why there are fewer mangoes that are visible and available for you to purchase this year round is because of climate change. And the yield of mangoes has dropped dramatically this year. And it's not just about perception, it is horticulturists and statisticians who are saying this. Now, India is the world's largest producer of mangoes, but the extreme weather conditions and the extreme weather patterns that have been witnessed since the month of February, March through April and May have resulted in a pretty dramatic loss in the mango yield this year. Now, India contributes to over 55% of the total world production of mangoes, from Alfonso to Kesar to Dasheri to Totapuri. One is just spoiled for choice. There are anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 different varieties of mangoes that are available through the length and breadth of India. There are, of course, raging debates within the connoisseurs of mango who go on debating almost endlessly as to which variety of mango tastes the best. The fruit is not just a relished delicacy in India, but it also has its lovers well beyond the boundaries of the South Asian nation. During the year 2022 to 23, India exported mangoes worth $48.53 million. Its major markets included places such as the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, Qatar, Kuwait, Nepal, Oman, and the United States. So what are the factors at play here? And how real is the threat of climate change for mangoes? The mango cultivation has been impacted in several Indian states, including in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which happens to be the biggest producer of mangoes in India. States of Gujarat, West Bengal, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu have also been badly impacted. Now, Uttar Pradesh accounts for nearly about 23% of the country's mango output. Crop damage has resulted in at least about 40% of the yield going to waste. This is up from the usual 10%. Now, in one of the towns of Malihabad, which is a very famous producer of a certain variety of mango called the Dasheri, nearly about 80% of this variety of mango, the yield has dropped dramatically this year. The output in the state has fallen by about 1.4 million tons in comparison with 2022. So let's understand a few things here. Mango is a tropical crop, requires temperatures of 27 to 35 degrees Celsius in the months of March and April to grow pretty well. Any diversion from this range is favorable. Any diversion from this range is not going to be favorable for the growth of the mangoes and will have a direct impact on flowering, fruit setting and fruit development and ripening. When it comes to rainfall, timing is crucial. The absence of rain during the flowering time, which falls between December to March, is the key here. Exposure to strong winds, whether hot or cold, is also harmful for the mango crop. But extreme weather patterns have become a norm due to climate crisis variations in temperatures and also abnormal rain pattern are the reasons as to why the mango yield has plummeted this year. And also remember, through the months of April and the first part of May, the temperatures in the northern part of India had plummeted, which had resulted in stunted growth in the mango fruit. In addition to this, stigmatic fluid and pollen, which are crucial for fertilization, were washed away with untimely rains. Moreover, it has also led to more incidents of pests and diseases this year. All of this has been compounded with hailstorm at the end of the flowering season in northern India, which has contributed to much of the damage. Frosty weather, high humidity and high winds have also added to the poor yield. Now, clearly, climate change is taking its toll on every aspect of our lives and livelihoods. Mango, the fruit that we all relish, is the latest casualty of what climate change can have an impact on. And if we as humans can't control climate change and if we can't mend our ways, then the favorite food that we all like to binge upon is something that is going to become much more difficult to access because of climate change in the years to come. All right, let's also now take a quick look with Gravitas images. We'll leave you with this. Thanks for watching.